Our second reading is taken from chapter 13 of the book of Psalms. How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long shall I take counsel in my soul, having sorrow in my heart daily? How long will my enemy be exalted over me? Consider and hear me, O Lord my God. Enlighten my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death, lest my enemy say, I have prevailed against him. Lest those who trouble me rejoice when I am moved. But I have trusted in your mercy. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord, because he has dealt bountifully with me. Our further reading is a portion taken from Spiritual Experiences, number 4721. I sense the change of state relative to the goodness and truth I had been held in before, and such as had been pleasant and delightful. Then I was in a similar circumstance, and not in a state of pleasure and delight. And yet there was inflow into the truth I remembered, that I had delighted in the former state, and thus was sustained, and fought back. This experience showed me how it is with the angels and their changes of state, and that in every state they are able to be held in goodness and truth. Even though the same thing in a different state seems to them unpleasant and sad, still, due to the remembrance of its pleasantness, then allow themselves to be held in a state of goodness and truth. From this, it was also plain to me how, when a person only resists a little or fights back against the evil and falsity, he or she is able to be held in a state opposite to them, one of pleasure and delight. So sometimes the mere taking notice of repugnance or a recollection of it is sufficient and bears this out. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long shall I take counsel in my soul, having sorrow in my heart daily? How long will my enemy be exalted over me? How long, O Lord? In this repetitious phrase, the psalmist poured out his soul before God. It pitched slightly higher and higher with each expression. We sense his desperation and need of the Lord's urgent help. He was sorrowful. What about us? What's in our life? Life has many joys and sorrows. Sadness, like joy, is an inevitable part and parcel of human life. Unfortunately, it is centered in our life as a basic component. We mourned for our loved ones passing away, our dear members passing into the spiritual world. We become sorrowful for the slow growth of the new church. It grieves us to observe increasing evils in our human society, and even lingering spring makes us gloomy. In this spiritual poem, King David sadly complains that God had long withdrawn from himself and delayed relieving him. His grief was from his awareness that the Lord was distant from him. What makes you sad? Sadness or grief is often experienced in our human life. Sorrow or depression is widely used as a common theme in literature, art, and philosophy. Sadness has been found among the ancient people too. Greek philosophy understood sadness as an antithesis to the joy that is worth striving for. It served as the basis of all Greek tragedies. The Stoics paid attention to its positive aspect by seeing as a human task to overcome sorrow by means of frugality and impassiveness. Sorrow is a mental distress associated with death, loss, and physical pain. The loved one's death makes us sorrowful, and our thoughts of our own imminent death may give us distress and anxiety. Jesus, in his human nature, felt sorrowful of his imminent death. He told his disciples in Gethsemane, "My soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to death. Stay here and watch with me." He went a little farther and fell on his face and prayed, saying, "O my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will." His disciples mourned and wept over his death until Mary brought the glad news of his resurrection. Sorrow and depression also manifest as physical and psychological pain, disease, injury, displeasure, and hardship. In our reading, the complaint of the psalmist turned into despair. Unfortunately, we encounter this unhappy feeling in many moments and various contexts of our life. This distressful emotion often overcomes us. We become sorrowful over the evening news, at the scene of a movie and a book, or just the falling leaves. Simply put, it seems to exist everywhere. Then we may wonder where this unhappy feeling comes from. Let's remember the general principle of the new church that we all receive what we think and what we desire, namely our thoughts and affections and desires, from the spiritual world. We are receiving vessels of them rather than generators. Sadness is not an exception. In King Saul's case, after the Spirit of the Lord departed from him due to his evils, he was troubled by a distressing spirit. Swedenborg, from his own experience, described that such a feeling comes from the influx from the spiritual world. We read, "People have within themselves what they believe, and what moves their hearts, and then what the angels who are with them are having similar thoughts and feelings, and are talking about these things among themselves. Cheerfulness and contentedness and peace flow into these people. However, when such thoughts and feelings are not part of what a person believes and feels, sadness and unrest and the like flow in, and in no other way does this inflow come down into the thought of the person, who can be thinking of something totally different at this time. The angelic influx is received into us according to the states we are in. When our thoughts and desires are in agreement with those of angels, their influx makes us cheerful and happy. But when our ideas and affections are discordant with them, we become to feel sad and anxious. We can understand this from a similar illustration and experience We enjoy conversations with close friends who happen to be like-minded. We enjoy easy communication and appreciate similar views on matters. Yet, we experience the opposite of emotions while we are engaging with different types of people. Secondly, we also become lower in our spirits when we sink down into the lower parts of our minds. Our minds are created to correspond to the spiritual world, so that we may be in association with our guardian angels and spirits. And at the same to this natural world, our lowest region of the mind is where we are mostly conjoined with hell and evil spirits as well as earthly things. Depression is a derived noun from the verb depress, which means to cause to drop or to sink. The Heavenly Doctrines for the New Church state that there is melancholy, anxiety, the cause of which is for the most part to be found in an infirm state of the body or of the lower mind. While we are lured by this lower mind, we are exposed to hell and evil spirits, then we become lower in our spirit. Our selfish greed and worldly aspiration, which are stirred by hell, produce endless and unquenched desires. Can we find any peace in the midst of them? No, there will be no rest. There is another type of sadness. Sometimes we are captured in this feeling without any reason. This state is caused by some spirits who like to infuse such bad feelings to people. These spirits are said to love things undigested and malicious, such as pertaining to food, which becomes undigested and foul in the stomach. So they are present with a person in such things because they find delight in them, and they talk, gathering on the place with one another from their evil affections. We read in Arcana Celestia, Heavenly Secrets, the spirits speak together about such things as adverse to the person, from which they usually flows in what is troublesome, undelightful, sad, or anxious, with much variety. Such spirits have often been with me, and they who infused anxieties were felt in the province of the stomach. I then heard what they said among themselves, which were such things as were adverse to my affections. Such is the influx with those who for no reason are oppressed with melancholy anxiety. Swedenborg was convinced many times that these spirits' influxes are the source of anxiety of the mind. When they left him, he felt such a sadness simultaneously disappear. Their affection in their speech flows in from this source into a person. When this affection is the opposite of one's affection, there arises in him sadness and melancholy anxiety. But when it agrees with it, it becomes in him gladness and cheerfulness. The teachings from the Heavenly Doctrines for the New Church teach us that good angels and evil spirits infuse their affections to us, and they incite delight or sadness within us. Some sorrows and depressions are worthy to note because they indicate that we are distant from angelic states and our loves are separated from heaven. However, there are some worthless feelings incited by evil spirits who rouse anxiety and depression by reminding us of sorrowful memories we have done wrong in the past and holding us in long and excessive guilt. Such feelings should be turned gradually into joy and pleasure. How can we turn worthless sorrow into delight and joy? Here are some practical suggestions from the heavenly doctrines. First, we need to try to be delightful and glad at all times. We need to maintain a positive attitude and cheerful heart in general. Our general principle or idea lures all the particular, smaller ones. Thus, all the objects of the senses which we see, hear, and feel. Thus, to a person who is glad at heart, all things that one hears and sees appear hilarious. But to a person who is sad at heart, all things that he sees and hears appear sad. So in other cases, the general affection is in all the particulars and causes them to be seen in the general affection. Second, we need to have a genuine goodness and truth, which we can use in times of sadness and depression. Angels in heaven can be enjoyed constantly by remembering goodness and truth in which they were delighted before. Angels also are undergoing changes of their states as we are. They are not to be not only in joyful and pleasant states, but also unhappy and unpleasant states. Yet they can be in constant joy even in times of sadness and depression, remembering a delightful state and presenting it to their minds. Swedenborg states, I sensed a change of state relative to the goodness and truth I had been held in before, and such as had been pleasant and delightful. Then I was in a similar circumstance and not in a state of pleasure and delight. And yet there was an inflow into the truth I remembered that I had delighted in the former state, and was thus sustained, and fought back. This experience showed me how it is with the angels and their changes of state, and that in every state they are able to be held in goodness and truth. We are placed in unhappy and sorrowful circumstances. The major cause of all the negative emotions is the influx from the other world. Angels and spirits are always with us and communicate their ideas and affections to us. The contents of their thoughts and affections instill either joy or sorrow within us. When they are averse or contrary to our general life, that is love, they cause us to be in anxiety and sadness, because all the joy of a person proceeds from one's love, and all the sadness and grief of mind from antagonism to one's love. Many things lead us to sorrow and depression. While we are reflecting on false ideas and contemplating evil desires, angelic influx, which is full of heavenly truth and caring love, charity, and mercy, bothers us and introduces us to sorrow and anxiety. This kind of sorrow is useful and ought to be noticed by us for the sake of our repentance and our regeneration. However, we become sorrowful and depressed by certain evil spirits for no reason, or maybe good and truth we have, which contradicts their wicked nature. We'd better ignore these feelings because they are caused by evil spirits who infuse us with their evil affection. Although they are permeated for no reason, if we respond to them with some consent and accept them part of us, then we become oppressed with sadness and depression. We know from experience how harmful chronic sadness and depression are. They are extremely destructive to our spiritual welfare as well as our physical health. These negative emotions and feelings lead us to inability, insomnia, hopelessness, misery, and even to suicide. They take away the joy and happiness we deserve from the Lord in our life. They make us tired of everything, and they isolate us from our loved ones. Such feelings also close our inner mind off from heaven. This condition also destroys our relationship with the Lord, who appears to be responsible for our own misery. We should get out of these hellish feelings as soon as possible. How can we walk out of them? First, let us obtain the glad heart, and let this cheerful spirit be the general and govern all particular smaller things, even the smallest thing in our life. In this uplifted spirit, we can turn all negative incidents into positive ones. Second, let's have affection for and delight in spiritual context, such as the truth of the word and charitable deeds. When we are under attack from hell, we can bring such heavenly context and memories back into our attention and consciousness to move into a heavenly state. In this remembrance of past experiences, what could be more powerful, do you think, and efficient between what we just know as piece of knowledge and what we have actually done? The truth and goodness which we reflected on and applied to our actual life will be more vividly and powerfully present in us than what we merely read from somewhere in the Word or heard from someone. This truth, which we never applied, will be remembered only ideally and abstractly at those desperate times. Do you think they can relieve us from our deep sadness and turn sorrow into joy? Maybe weakly and vaguely. Let us remember the Lord's truth, loves, and act according to them. Make all these heavenly assets ready and available for the time of distress and sadness. This is our prayer this morning. Remember the word to your servant, upon which you have caused me to hope. This is my comfort in my affliction, for your word has given me life. Amen.